Hello everyone! Even highly successful space missions can sometimes be interrupted by unfortunate failures. The American cargo spacecraft Cygnus has been one of the most reliable means of delivering supplies to the International Space Station. However, its third flight ended in a major disaster. A newer version of the Antares 130 rocket launched with an upgraded Castor 30XL second stage. The Antares has a liftoff weight of 280 tons and can carry an 8-ton payload to orbit. Just a few seconds after Antares lifted off, flight operators noticed the first stage engine wasn't functioning properly, and the rocket wouldn't make it into orbit. They quickly decided to self-destruct it to prevent it from crashing in populated areas. This is what the launch looked like from a distance of 6 kilometers away from the Wallops spaceport. The rocket exploded at 150 meters above the launch pad. The debris fell down, causing an even bigger explosion. Just imagine, an accident destroyed 2,296 kilograms of valuable cargo that was headed for the space station. This included over 700 kilograms of materials for scientific research and nearly 800 kilograms of supplies for the crew.
Thickness on it's at 108%.
Avionics power nominal.
One major threat during rocket accidents is the massive amount of fuel on board. In the 2013 Proton M rocket crash at Baikonur, the rocket was loaded with approximately 600 tons of fuel, including kerosene and liquid oxygen, which ignited during the explosion. The rocket intended to put navigation satellites into orbit went down because the angular velocity sensors were installed wrong, which distorted position data. That single error resulted in more than $50 million in losses. The Starship reusable heavy lift rocket is one of the most ambitious projects in modern space exploration. Designed by SpaceX, this will be the largest and heaviest rocket in history, and it's intended to be the main vehicle for colonizing missions to the Moon and Mars. The current plans include several versions, such as a crewed spacecraft, a lunar lander, and a refueling tanker. These shots show the test launch of the Starship SN9 prototype at the Starbase launch site in Boca Chica, Texas. The purpose of the test was to test the launch and landing of the spacecraft. After takeoff, the craft successfully shut down its engines, reached an altitude of 10 kilometers, and performed a complex horizontal maneuver. The final stage didn't go as planned. During the landing maneuvers, one of the engines failed to ignite, causing the spacecraft to crash into the platform at speed. Instead of a smooth landing, it ended in a massive fireball.
And there's the explosion. Now listen to that.
Although the tests were only partly successful and caused some damage, they were still a significant step forward in developing the Starship, which costs about $90 million to build. What's really terrifying is when a disaster occurs far from the launch platform. On June 30th, 2024, a Chinese Tianlong 3 rocket from Space Pioneer had a major accident. What was supposed to be a static fire test turned into an uncontrolled launch. The plan was to test the rocket's engine without launching the full 71-meter, 590-ton rocket, which is intended to rival the Falcon 9. However, the launch stand failed, and the rockets took off unexpectedly. Luckily, without any onboard computers functioning, it didn't head towards the nearby city of Gongyi, but instead crashed into a hill about 1.5 kilometers away from where it was supposed to be tested. Another epic explosion marked the end of the Starship prototype test. The accident happened in December 2020, when SpaceX engineers were conducting a test flight that reached an altitude of 12.5 kilometers. With the help of 3 engines, the spacecraft successfully launched and reached the designated altitude, after which the engines were turned off as planned. The next phase also went smoothly, with the spacecraft making a controlled descent in a horizontal position using aerodynamic fins. When it was time to land, Starship reignited its engines and tilted into a vertical position, preparing for a touchdown. However, it was later discovered that there was insufficient pressure in the fuel tank during this stage, preventing the engines from functioning properly to slow down the descent. Instead of landing safely, Starship crashed onto the pad and exploded. It was a dramatic scene for all the onlookers, who almost believed the mission had gone off without a hitch. The entire flight lasted 6 minutes and 42 seconds. This video shows a failed attempt to bring the Dragon SpaceX CRS-6 cargo ship back after its successful mission to the ISS in May 2015. It was the second attempt to land the first stage on an unmanned ship. The re-entry and descent went well, and the landing was pretty close to success. However, the excess sideways speed still caused the rocket to topple, and the landing was too rough for the stage to survive. Despite the explosion, the platform managed to stay mostly intact. A powerful explosion at the Starbase, SpaceX's test launch site in Texas, was caused by a failed rocket engine test. The shockwave could be felt several kilometers away. For locals and environmentalists, this blast is a major concern, as such incidents scare both people and animals.
The SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket adding, and Falcon has cleared the tower.
Vehicles programming downrange. Speed 200, stage 1 propulsion is still nominal.
the 9th launch of the Dragon cargo spacecraft, developed by the Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, which is what SpaceX stands for, ended in failure. This was another flight under the ISS resupply program in June 2015. Just over 2 minutes after liftoff from Cape Canaveral, the Falcon 9 rocket carrying a cargo ship began to show signs of a flight anomaly and quickly started to break apart. The investigation revealed that the most likely cause was damage to a component of the helium tank strut, which is used to pressurize the liquid oxygen tank. It turned out that the strut didn't match the specifications stated by the manufacturer and couldn't handle the required loads. It's interesting that the rocket crash didn't damage the Dragon spacecraft itself. If the ship had the right software, it might have been able to land safely using its parachutes. In the end, both the spacecraft and nearly 2 tons of payload were lost, including a brand new EMU spacesuit for spacewalks. And let's not forget the $60 million price tag for a Falcon 9 launch. The American Trident II ballistic missile, also known as the Trident II or Trident D5, is a 3-stage rocket designed for launch from nuclear submarines. It can travel over 11,000 kilometers. Following a round of tests in the late 1980s, where only 2 out of 15 launches failed, it was put into service. By 2012, the production cost of one Trident II missile was around $70.5 million. Another explosion. Just another milestone for SpaceX, a company that has revolutionized the space industry over the past few years. This video shows the test flight of a 3-engine prototype of the Falcon 9 rocket, which self-destructed almost immediately after launch. The test took place in August 2014 at the McGregor facility in Texas. The cause of the failure was an engine malfunction, and as a company representative noted at the time, that's exactly why they do test launches, to find and fix issues with new technologies. It was obvious from the start that the trial launch didn't go as planned. During the drill, the cruise missile immediately went off course, and the caliber, meant to strike targets up to 2,600 kilometers away, plunged into the sea just a few dozen meters from the frigate. This was a major flop, especially when you know that each missile costs about $300,000. Modern missiles in anti-aircraft systems can reach speeds of over 2,000 meters per second, hit targets hundreds of kilometers away, and use active radar guidance. However, even with this advanced technology, costly mistakes can still happen, as the price of one missile can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. In 2018, the Falcon 9 rocket had 20 launches, and only one of them on December the 5th was not entirely successful. After successfully launching the Dragon cargo ship into orbit with the second stage, the first stage made a smooth return through the atmosphere, heading for landing at Landing Zone 1 on Cape Canaveral. However, during the descent, the rocket had hydraulic issues with its steering. The stage switched to a safe mode and ended up making a pretty graceful water landing. Right after it touched down, Elon Musk announced that boats were already on their way to tow it back to base. You're about to witness one of the most expensive and devastating computer errors in history. In 1996, a major accident occurred at the Guiana Space Center involving the Ariane 5 rocket, which was the latest development from the European Space Agency. Building on the success of its predecessor, the Ariane 4, this new heavy-lift rocket took a decade to develop and cost $7 billion. Unfortunately, its first test flight lasted only 40 seconds. The rocket reached an altitude of 3,700 meters, but then unexpectedly veered off course, started falling apart, and eventually exploded. Its debris was scattered over an area of 12 square kilometers. The investigation found that the flight anomaly was caused not by design flaws or weather conditions, but by a software error. This single computer glitch resulted in massive financial losses. In addition to the rocket, 4 satellites intended for orbit were destroyed. The total damage from the accident is estimated at up to $500 million. Despite this setback, work on the Ariane 5 continued, and it eventually became the main launch vehicle for the European Space Agency, successfully completing over 100 missions. Is there anything more painful than seeing a complex and costly project that took months to prepare fall apart in just a few seconds?
T plus 40 seconds. Oh no.
In August 1998, a 900-ton Titan IV rocket lifted off from Cape Canaveral to send a secret military reconnaissance satellite into orbit. However, just 40 seconds into its flight, the rocket, which had successfully completed its last 18 missions, lost control. The ground team ordered its destruction. The disaster that destroyed equipment worth a staggering $1.3 billion was caused by a single wire, which triggered a short circuit in the flight control system. The Momo rocket is a project by the Japanese private company Interstellar Technologies. In this 2018 video, you can see their second attempt at launching this 10-meter tall rocket, which uses a single engine powered by a mix of ethanol and liquid oxygen. During these tests, Momo 2 only managed to lift off a few dozen meters before dramatically crashing back onto the launch pad. Despite losing over $400,000, the Japanese startup didn't give up and succeeded with their third launch attempt in 2019. Kairos is a lightweight rocket developed by the private company Space One in Japan. According to the concept, the rocket is 18 meters long and weighs 23 tons at launch, and it can deliver a payload of 250 kilograms to low Earth orbit. So far, there's only been one launch attempt for the Kairos, which took place in spring 2024 from the private spaceport in Kii, Wakayama Prefecture. The rocket blew up just seconds after the first stage launched. It's probably because the self-destruct system activated when it detected an issue with the trajectory, speed, or control system.
爆発しちゃったんじゃん。失敗や。失敗やで。あ、わかった。
While accidents are not uncommon in the space industry, such a start is a tough challenge for any startup. On May the 29th, 2020, the fourth prototype of SpaceX's Starship rocket, which is meant to replace the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets, exploded during a static fire test at the Boca Chica site in Texas. The explosion happened due to a methane leak and ignition, which fuels the Raptor engine used on the Starship. Later on, SpaceX continued testing this model and achieved significant success. The fully assembled Starship prototype SN-15 made a successful flight to 11 kilometers high and landed back on the pad. Here's another case where operators had to destroy a rocket after what seemed like a successful launch. The GSLV, India's expendable rocket, was supposed to put a powerful communication satellite weighing over 2 tons into a geosynchronous orbit. "45 seconds after launch, the first stage boosters stopped responding to the onboard computer's commands, causing the rocket to veer off course. A few seconds later, a decision was made to destroy the rocket, which exploded at an altitude of about 8 kilometers. The debris fell into the Indian Ocean, costing the Indian government at least $65 million, a significant blow to the country's budget. real wall of fire. The Titan I rocket was originally designed as an intercontinental ballistic missile, but later became a launch vehicle for sending payloads into space. Flight tests for the Titan I began in 1959, but not all were successful. For instance, on December the 12th, the launch failed because the destruct charges for the first stage engines were accidentally triggered due to vibration. Here's another startling video taken by bystanders from 3 kilometers away during the Antares rocket launch accident in 2014.
Ignition, 0.
First motion.
First motion.
An odd flight issue happened with the Rocket 3 rocket, which was created by the private company Space. The small 2-stage rocket, measuring just 13 meters, showed unusual behavior right from the start of its launch from Kodiak, Alaska. Instead of a smooth liftoff, it first swerved sideways before beginning to climb. Despite this, it failed to get beyond the Kármán line. In the stratosphere at about 33 kilometers up, a rocket lost communication with Earth, and, judging by the footage from its onboard camera, started falling apart. Unfortunately, right now, the ratio of successful to failed launches isn't looking good for Rocket. Space engineers designed this rocket to be the simplest and most cost-effective launcher in the future, with a launch price of just $2.5 million.
What happened here, and as we dig into the flight data, we are optimistic about the future and our next attempt.
The Delta II was one of the most reliable and successful American rockets, with a track record spanning over 20 years. Yet, it did have a few unsuccessful launches along the way. On January 17, 1997, this rocket was supposed to launch a GPS satellite into orbit, but it exploded just 13 seconds after liftoff, failing to reach 450 meters. The disaster was caused by damage to the solid rocket booster. The financial blow was heavy. The Delta II rocket's destruction cost $55 million, and the GPS satellite was worth another $40 million.
0.
A spectacular blast, looking like a fireworks show, was the highlight of a Morpheus lander test. This kind of vertical takeoff and landing robot is essential for exploring planets and moons. The test took place in 2012 at Kennedy Space Center. On its second solo flight, Morpheus crashed during takeoff, exploded twice afterwards, and was no longer salvageable. Accidents often push prototype development forward, and this one was no exception. It led to roughly 70 upgrades, including new backup devices to counteract startup vibrations. Like with launch vehicles, a failed missile launch from an anti-aircraft system poses a significant risk to infrastructure. After launch, the main engine of the rocket failed to ignite, causing it to crash straight onto the launch pad. A big fire broke out, badly damaging the anti-aircraft missile system. These kinds of videos really get people excited about rocket science. For example, these tests show that just firing up the engines doesn't mean the rocket is ready to fly.